Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're going to actually start off this video with all the new long-range content that's came out, and I'm going to show you first here what CPC's been discussing for the last few weeks. Now, they issued this back on August the 19th, but this is kind of their 12-month outlook on total temperature deviations from normal and also on precipitation. So it's a great resource. It's just another source of information, and we're going to kind of use this to compare against the European model and some other analog information we've got here in a few minutes. What I really want to focus in on, we're going to leave this kind of small for just a moment here, but you notice that September, October, November, much of the country is currently being favored for mild conditions. And this would be consistent with what's going on with our current La Nina and also consistent with some other patterns, namely that the jet stream is pretty far to the north. But I want to focus in, if we can, on maybe just a preliminary winter outlook. And so this is what the CPC is currently forecasting for December, January, February. You can see that most of the above average temperatures are confined to the south and along the east coast, with near normal temperatures coming through much of the rest of the United States and even cooler than normal in the Pacific Northwest. And we look at this and we say, well, what's driving this? Because at the same time, if we slide down here toward precipitation, let's kind of do the same thing. It appears as though September, October, November, that time frame could favor drier and more mild conditions here. But if we come back to that winter time frame, you now start to see that where we expect it to be above average in terms of temperatures, we expect it to be drier than normal. And this is not good news for Southern California, of course. But the northern tier states, the northern Rockies, especially the Cascades, getting here, this is great to build up that winter snowpack and then a large area of equal chances. Now, when you look at all of this, the reason why I'm starting here is because when we understand the driving mechanisms in these seasonal forecasts, we're reminded that there are really only two predictors that we're capable of using that will help us here. And probably the most important is ocean temperatures. The second would be soil moisture values. And so we continue to see a large area of cooler water, right? And we've been talking about the redevelopment of this La Nina now for a little while. And the question is, are we going to start to see those trade winds respond? I've been saying that quite a bit as of late. There's also very, very warm water still in place in the North Pacific Ocean too, which we need to consider. Now, speaking of those trades, the latest Southern Oscillation Index has started to rebound. Now, remember, when we look at this value, this is just a pressure comparison between the pressure in Tahiti in the Pacific and Darwin in Northern Australia. And we like to see these values above 7 to consider the base state of the trade winds and therefore much of the rest of the atmosphere to be in kind of a La Nina based state. And it was there back in July and the front half of August, and then it kind of calmed down, and now we start to see those numbers coming back up. So just thinking about that and understanding that these ocean temperatures are expected to cool, let's go take a look at what we would normally expect to get in winter should La Nina be the more dominant driver. So what you're looking at here is this is using data for December through February, okay? And we're comparing the upper level height flow when we have a positive value of the multivariate INSO index. So in other words, if there's El Nino, it would be positive. If there's La Nina, negative. Now I flip the colors around to make this a little more intuitive. We generally find higher pressure here and a jet stream that's pretty variable, but oftentimes ridges here into the Gulf of Alaska. And then it tends to dive across the United States. This tends to set up above average snowfall in the in parts of the Northwest, including the Cascades and Northern Rockies, and an active Ohio River Valley storm track. All right, it tends to be drier and warmer to the south, and we tend to allow for quite a bit of cold air to come through the Canadian prairie and invade the northern tier of the United States. And if you pull together all the analog years and even look for ones where there's a second La Nina following a first La Nina, you tend to get the same thing. But, the question is, what are these correlations and are they very strong, and what do the models say? So let's kind of get some answers to that. Right now, for November, December, January, and this is brand new data that was just released here yesterday, we continue to see the cooler ocean temperatures right here along the equator and to the south. We also see some sort of reflection of what we call the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole. And the Indian Ocean dipole is found when there's warmer water here and cooler water, put a C over it here. And you tend to just get really good rising motion in this area. So what ends up happening is when this sets up is strong trade winds this way. You then have weaker trade winds that way. And the net effect is to make the air rise in this area. And if that's the place where we get our most focal point in rising motion, that tends to be where we have our most negative velocity potentials, meaning rising motion, and also where the MJO tends to hang out. And if there's rising motion there tends to be a lot of sinking motion in, through parts of the Pacific, and that could encroach on South America. And today I'm going to release a separate video about South America. And we'll see what it tends to do with pushing that jet stream north here over this warm blob and potential high pressure area. Okay. The latest update here from the European model does continue to forecast that the average or the mean of all 51 ensemble members is right around minus 0.5 degrees Celsius. So we would call that a weaker La Nina. But it's important to note that through midwinter here, there's not a single ensemble member that even comes back up to average. So we're still very much seeing this as a second La Nina following the one we had last winter. Now from there, let's go take a look at what the current forecast is for December, January, February. And now you can see why I wanted to show you, let's see here, where was it? Sorry, this, okay? Remember that ridge and the downstream trough feature like that? Well, you now start to see that in the current forecast, which means the longer range models are honing in on that. So they'll flow doing something like that with higher heights along the southern part of the United States, okay? So as we start to see that pattern unfolding, it also advertised something like this a year ago. And certainly last winter was highly variable, as most North American winters are. But we asked the question again, is this what's going to drive our main climate pattern? So before we take a look at that, I just want to remind you of one thing here. Going into a La Nina in fall, so let's look at September and October, I just want to remind you that for most of the country, the correlations are weak, especially with respect to precipitation. Now, if we were developing an El Nino, this area here would have a much higher chance of having some early season precipitation return in Southern California through Nevada, Utah. Even though Arizona's had a very wet monsoon this year, this would be welcome. But this is not the case this year. And around the rest of the country, these correlations are honestly too weak to really use in our fall time period. So please keep that in mind, because I'm going to show you both time periods here in a few moments. But first, let's just go look out there. Maybe we'll do this month by month. This is the new forecast from the European model for September. Now, this is their seasonal forecast. You're only going to get monthly values here. But as we've been discussing, they tend to keep much of the central and northern plains on the wetter side of things, same with the Canadian prairie. We'll talk about why in a moment. And drier in the southeast, barring any tropical system. But as we go from there into the month of October, we see we kind of shift that over in this direction, and we start to bring in wetter conditions here. One of the big reasons for that is that at this point, the setup of the jet stream might be favoring something a bit more like this. So we're drier to the south, and there's that active Ohio River Valley storm track. Now, these signals are weak overall, and this is the month of October, which we think about a lot of harvest activity in this area. So I'm just looking at it for the pattern at this point, and then as we go from October into November, now this area begins to show better signs of being drier than normal, while this section of the northwest shows up wet. And this is just quite consistent with what I expected for a La Nina progressing through fall. So then December, but watch this, as we go from December into January, there it is. There's the wetter, focused in on the Pacific Northwest. There's that active Ohio River Valley storm track, which even follows climatology a bit. You can see we're drier along the coast. And that's January, and we follow it again with February. So what I'm seeing here is that this is going to be an area that possibly, really rebuilds soil moisture values throughout winter. And we're going to help it out quite a bit early in the winter in the west. The question is, how long does it last in the west? Some of the new model runs kind of give us a little bit of a mixed bag here across the west. And what I mean by that is you now see in February showing up drier. So if I just kind of show you this a little differently, why don't we look at a December, January, February? Now do you see what I mentioned? We have wetter here, active Ohio River Valley storm track. During La Nina years, California tends to be drier, Texas tends to be drier, and the Gulf Coast tends to be drier as well. And we're just seeing that the model right now is heavily responding to that. Now, a few moments ago, I did show you September and October by themselves, but we also have another source of forecasting for that from the European Center. And I'll show you later on, I think they'll come out later on this week, what the stuff we run in the United States shows for that as well. That comes from the National Multi-Model Ensemble. They're just a few days after the European releasing their data. And this is what I want to discuss, okay? This is a 1-month forecast of pressure. Now, it's subtle, but I want you to watch this. Right here is the average position of the 1,016 millibar line. And this is going from now, September 6th, through October the 6th. I'm going to remove my drawing, and what I want to do is as I slide this 1 month sliding window forward, what I want you to see is that as we go from mid-September into mid-October, that line has really opened up. Do you see it? It's now way here, and we've built in 1,020. Now what I'm looking for here is the kind of things that were disruptive in our harvests in the midsection of the country in the past. The same things that often cause really dry conditions to form in the southeast. And that is building the Bermuda High farther to the west, over the Appalachian Mountains, for example. Because as we see moving forward, that seems to be the case. We're building the pressure here. Now let's go back, and I want to show you the same thing, but in terms of precipitation. So let's do a 30-day anomaly. We're going to slide this forward. Ready? So as we move forward, what you're going to notice is that if the pressure begins to build here, what happens is around it, we're kind of opening this up for flow and possibly seeing that ring of fire precipitation pattern setting up. It could extend to the Northern Plains, Great Lakes, Canadian Prairie, and we are expecting on-time arrival, maybe even a little early, of the moisture returning here to the Pacific Northwest. That's been very consistent in the last 4 updates from this model. What I'm concerned about is, are we going to see a repeat of like a 2018 where we just opened the floodgates for a couple of weeks right in through this area where some places saw between 800 and 1200% of normal precipitation while the southeast got quite hot and quite dry? I'm not going to take that off the table as a possibility, but I also don't think that it is a highly likely scenario. But then as we move toward the end of the forecast time period, we tend to lose the signals, and as we normally do with these models, and it could be that we move into the middle and end of harvest time for the Midwest over to much more favorable conditions. All right? So that's what I wanted to address first, this long-range outlook. Now, let's go take a look at some of the things we're dealing with here in the near term. Over the last week, let's shrink that up so we can see it a little bit better. There we go. This is what our precipitations look like compared to normal. And of course, we've discussed at length what Hurricane Ida has done. Notice how dry it's been, though, when you get over here to the coast of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, where Ida's moisture did not make it. And then also where Ida was originally forecast to go, which was actually in through here, where it didn't, we now see much, much drier conditions, for example, around the Red River Valley of the South. But much of the central and northern plains, very heavy rainfall. This is key in terms of timing with the winter wheat planting. And also right in through this area here, very heavy rain over to the Ohio River Valley as well. Now, if we take a look at that and see where things are going, I'm going to show you the latest satellite observations from today. So this was late in the afternoon here on Monday, Labor Day. I hope you're all having a good Labor Day, by the way. As I rock this back and forward, what I'm interested in is seeing kind of the moving of that low pressure system going through parts of Ontario into Quebec, the front that's draped all the way down here toward Louisiana. And I also am paying attention to these clouds right here. Now you watch this again with me, ready? As I go back and forth, look at the speed of those high level clouds. The jet stream is moving there, and we're blowing a lot of that smoke from the wildfires here into the northern plains as well. Now, these are the upper level winds I just showed you. Let's go take a look at those surface winds. Of course, we have Larry here, a powerful hurricane, which many of us watched over the weekend intensify very rapidly. We then have this low that's building up here just in parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And look at the strong winds on the backside. I'll show you the effect of those in a few moments. But there are three deep lows that are lined up here coming out of the North Pacific, just south of the Aleutian Islands and into the Gulf of Alaska. And that tells me that I think this pattern moving forward is going to have it's going to favor some sort of northern track to it. Okay? Now first, I would like to address what's going on in the tropics. Larry, right now, 120 mile an hour sustained winds, so this is a pretty powerful tropical cyclone. And as we take a look here, just where this is going, you get a sense here that it's going to maintain that major hurricane status, going just to the east of Bermuda before making this turn and heading up here, possibly clipping the Canadian Maritimes. But other than that, that's all we're looking at. Now, if we go back, I just want to also address this feature here that's coming out of the Bay of Campeche today. There's a weak circulation and associated convection that is now forecast to cut across parts of Florida. Last week, I was concerned about this spreading more moisture into Louisiana, further causing flooding problems there after Ida went through, but it looks as though the turn's going to be made more quickly to the east based upon the steering currents there. And we can even see that circulation. Okay, so it's being pushed, something in through here, and then what's going to happen is this circulation, see it right there? It's going to have to get moved off in this direction here with time. So let's go take a look at what this all boils down to by looking at our national all hazards weather map. So if our flood issues going on here, this is all red flag warning. We have our heat advisories looking at mid-90s to about 107, 108 degree Fahrenheit in places in the Central Valley. But it's those strong winds in this area that are really causing a lot of problems. I'd like to show you those quickly. This is using, in fact, let's get the update here, sorry. If we look at the latest data, there we go. This is now the 12Z run. And if we kind of watch how the winds are changing here as this slowly loads, this is looking at cumulative wind gusts. So as we play this forward, this is just taking us out here through the beginning of this week. If you notice here through Tuesday and Wednesday, these winds are quite strong coming through parts of the northern plains. And here's that big load that goes barreling into British Columbia. And you can still see the stronger winds kind of curling right over here. In fact, let me just show you where they come into play. There they are. Those are the winds from Larry. See this over here? But you do notice that cutting across Florida, there's some stronger winds here associated with that tropical system, but yet we're not expecting this to strengthen very much at all. So we do have a bit of a windy week in several places. Here in the plains, Midwest, from this tropical system and from Larry. All right. Now from there, let's go take a look at what those upper level winds are doing. And I left this all the way out here at day 10 because we continue to see unblocked flow with short waves sliding through basically just along the US-Canada border. Now how we got there, let's just go back and look at this. You'll see that there's a large ridge building here. And the flow is going to have to go around that temporarily. There's going to be a lot of upper level convergence in the flow in this area. And the best rising motion is going to be east. As we keep playing this forward, that just sends the jet stream north and kind of leaves it there. See, we keep getting these pieces flying through, south of Alaska, but the whole jet stream pattern stays pretty far to the north. As I play it on through, that's what we continue to see. All right. So what does all that mean in terms of precipitation? Let's shrink this up so we can see it. 12Z run, this is what we see from the European model over the next week in terms of precipitation anomalies. So we do have one low we're going to talk about in a few moments cutting through the Great Lakes and the severe threat it's going to have here. But behind that, with that ridge opening up, we're drier than normal through a big section of the United States here. We have our tropical system here that we're not expecting to strengthen too much, and this is Larry. So outside of that, much of the United States is going to have a drier next 7 days. Now let's talk about that severe weather event, because tomorrow on the 7th we do see that the Storm Prediction Center has identified, well, you can see the tail end of the front coming all the way down here, but a large area that is under slight risk. If we just use the models we have this afternoon, in fact, let's just see real quick if we've got the 12 or the 18Z in yet. I've still got the 12Z here. That's all right. We're going to play this forward. I want you to see that low right there come pulling through parts of Manitoba into Ontario. As it comes over the Great Lakes, excuse me, tomorrow afternoon, we're going to watch the tail end of that front potentially kick off a line of storms in through here. There's a severe wind threat with this, of course. There's hail, and we might even see if this turns into what we call a QLC, excuse me, a quasi-linear convective system. That if there are breaks in this line, we're going to watch those for brief tornadic spin-ups. So I want folks that are in Michigan to keep a close eye on this. And we're going to see those storms build down the line in through here. It's going to be a broken line, but by tomorrow evening, we're going to keep a very close eye on this. All right. Outside of that, scattered storms across the southeast, very typical of this time of year. And then that moves through. And to be honest, that's about it for the midsection of the country for the remainder of the week. The next low pulls too far to the north. The ridge becomes established. And if we just flip this over and just say, well, how much do we get over the next week? Well, you've already seen this in terms of anomaly, but this is total accumulated precip from the European. And the 12Z GFS almost says the same thing. Very consistent between the two models. There are subtle differences, like right in through Illinois here. But outside of that, excuse me, what I'm looking for is consistency in the models, excuse me there. And I see pretty consistent behavior overall. So let's just go watch that European and see how things progress, okay? So as we play this forward, there comes the system on Tuesday cutting through, basically Lake Superior and through Ontario. And that's going to bring the severe weather through Michigan tomorrow evening, and the tail end of that front's coming through like this. Now behind it, outside of the scattered storms here and the low wrapping up into Quebec, bringing the showers into New England on, the showers and storms, excuse me, to New England on Wednesday. You're just going to see here that Thursday into Friday and Saturday, not a whole lot. Remember I told you the jet stream pattern's a bit north. There is a weak disturbance here coming through next Friday night into Saturday, kind of coming over that same area out of Manitoba into Ontario. But it just brings showers through the Great Lakes. And so we're not looking at a lot of our agriculture productive land getting a whole lot of rain this next week. And that's, not to pass on it, but do want to take you back. Just keep an eye right here. This is where we expect that tropical kind of impulse of moisture to be by Wednesday night. And you just see that Wednesday through Thursday, it's going to cut across Florida there. So you stitch all that together and we just come back to some of the numbers we looked at here. And this is what we're expecting over the next 7 days in terms of total accumulated precipitation. Now by week 2, the pattern is going to look something like this. So this is going through Tuesday the 14th into Wednesday the 15th. And to be honest, when I see the jet stream look like this at day 10, this is just a northern track. There's broad lower heights here, higher heights there. The jet stream's zonal, and it's just moving through this area very quickly. And then you'll notice that the longer waves the model picks up on tend to retrograde a bit. So by the 19th, middle of the month here, we tend to develop more of a robust trough feature coming in here to the Gulf of Alaska, which is just going to send that jet stream around like that. Now, using just one run to look at here, you can imagine that gives you relatively weak precipitation signals. If the jet stream's zonal and north, there's not a real reason for there to be a strong bias one way or the other in terms of the precipitation patterns into week 2. But do take note that if there's a place that could favor above normal, it'd be here, and also down here along the Gulf Coast. And we're going to watch to see what's possibly developing down here into week 2 in the next couple of days here, and we'll bring you an update about that on Thursday. GFS says actually the same thing. Okay, so you can see where it's got the above average precipitation, drier most other places, and we're still keeping an eye on something down here. All right, from there, let's do a quick discussion of temperature, and we'll wrap this up since we covered the long range at the beginning. Let's walk right through today's highs. Very hot today here on Labor Day in the midsection of the country, extending back to the west. And as we play this forward into Tuesday, we see that warmer air start to move forward. But remember, on Tuesday, we have the low that's coming in through this area. So the frontal boundary is about in through here, Tuesday midday, and it moves over to Michigan by Tuesday evening. So what we end up getting out of this is there's the cooler air on Wednesday that comes through, but the ridge rebuilds in the backside. We go back over to very hot conditions in the west, and we saw those heat advisories there. So this is Thursday, getting into Friday and Saturday. A lot of the heat stays in the western half of the United States, very hot into Texas and Oklahoma, and that's what we get on Sunday. You just see broad warmth generally across the United States going into next week. It's because the jet stream is doing something like that, remember? So we could be cooler along the coast, but everywhere else is going to see above normal temperatures. What this also does is this removes any threat, I think, in the next 2 weeks of us having a concern over a frost, an early frost, anywhere, I think, where we have ag in the United States. Because day 5 through 10, while there's a little bit of cooler air coming in through here, as you see here in the 12Z ECMWF, I'm still not registering with any of the forecast data risk of a frost. And by day 10 through 15, we start to see the rebuilding of that warmth as the jet stream really stays to the north. So those are the things I'm watching as we kind of move into this the rest of this week, and hopefully that this long range video here at the beginning helped kind of put some a point to what we're worried about for the fall and winter, or at least what we're watching. So I'll talk to you again on Thursday. Have a good week. Thanks.